Este é o podcast Pit Pit. How's it going? Welcome to the PP Podcast. A pleasure to have you listening. Thanks for tuning in on whichever platform you're tuning in on. So basically, I stumbled across the work of Rob Castles, who runs a website called LazyStuff.com, and I was quite interested in his work, particularly with his sort of minor obsession with pubs in Carshalton. If you haven't heard of Rob, or LazyStuff.com for that matter, I would urge you to check it out because he's got some really cool stuff going on there. And some cool stuff for sale, particularly related to Carshalton and Wallington a little bit. Anyhow, I contacted Rob one day, invited him onto the podcast, which he obviously agreed to do. You know, who wouldn't? Anyway, we ended up having a great chat about local history and the pubs in Carshalton before finally going on a fantasy pub crawl around the area based on a piece of artwork that Rob had produced, which is for sale on his website. Did I say that? LazyStuff.com. So whatever you're doing, whoever you're with, wherever you are, this is the PP Podcast with Rob Castles. Hey, this is the PP Podcast, and I'm here with Rob. Rob, how are you doing?
Yeah, not bad, thanks. Yeah, nice to meet you for the first time.
Rob, I came across a post, something you posted recently in the Carshalton group, which was an image of an old pub, the old Swan Ale House. And I thought that I knew most things about historic Carshalton, but I didn't know about that. How did you come across that? What's the story behind that?
Yeah, it's quite exciting. I think if anyone is interested in history and in local history, it was quite exciting for me to think this is something which actually most people have not heard of. And it's quite unusual because often with history and local history, it's kind of stuff that comes back round again, whereas this one was something which was kind of a new thing. I suppose it's quite a sort of bit of a backstory how I came across it, but as you probably know, I do have done posters of Carshalton pubs and this kind of thing, and I've done mugs of Carshalton pubs and illustrations, and one of the people that I know bought one of the mugs I started following on Instagram, and her name's Maggie. And on her Instagram post, she started putting these pictures of the back of her property. And it was an old pub door and an old pub window. And I thought, that's interesting. And she said, it's an old inn. And I thought, interesting. And then she put a few sort of notes about it. This is going back about a year or so. And then with lockdown and things being quieter for me, I had to look a bit more detail at what she'd been writing. And I thought, actually, this is interesting because most people assume the Old Swan is the pub that is on the corner of Old Swan Yard. And in fact, they call that pub sometimes known as the old, it's actually the Swan Inn, and they call it sometimes known as the Old Swan pub. But it's not that, it's actually a separate pub. But that is the Old Swan, that's the Swan Inn, and the other one is the Old Swan Ale House. Mm. So I thought, to make it interesting, I'd illustrate it into how it would look if it was still a pub today.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you know when it closed down, or was it?
Well, the only reason anyone even knew that it was ever a pub is the fact that they were doing some history. The people that lived there, they'd been there about 50 years, and they were looking through the history of their house. And I think a local historian called John Phillips had actually spoken to them saying, well, I'm really interested to know about the history of your building, because they'd obviously been past it. And so she said, well, come round. And they found these old court records, and they discovered that when it was built, which was that particular building in 1740, and the fact that it was referred to as the Old Swan Inn. And that's when they made, this was in 2011, the connection that was not, there was a pub there, and it wasn't the other pub. So it was actually built, I think, possibly about 100 years before that. There was an original building, which was partly rebuilt in 1740. And then we don't know for definite the dates it was an actual pub, but I think it was 1864. That property was split up into three residential dwellings. So sometime up until then, it was a pub.
Wow,
so
okay.
My illustration was, because we don't have the facts, my illustration just showed, well, hang on, if it was still a pub today, what would it look like? And I couldn't imagine what it would be like 100 years ago, because I'd probably get it completely and utterly wrong if I tried to imagine it. So I did it as it was today.
Yeah, well, and it wouldn't be out of place, would it, either? Because it would sort of sit quite comfortably among the other pubs that are in that area, notably the Hope and the Racehorse as well, isn't it? That's on that little stretch of road.
Yes, so actually it's a very interesting stretch of road, West. I don't know all the history of West Street, but I do know it had a lot of shops and things down there. And the building, some people have said that they thought actually it was quite a nice building. If it was still a pub, yes, it would look quite nice. And it's got the little central square area where you could get horses through, because there would be quite a big area at the back for stables. But it's interesting, particularly to me, again, because it's the oldest existing pub building that I know of that was built as a pub. So the Woodman in Carshalton is a very old building, but it wasn't built as a pub. Whereas this one, I don't know if it was actually built as a pub, but it certainly, its licensee goes back into the 17th century, I think, as a pub. West Street, again, itself, if you keep going, you've got the Hope, as you mentioned, which is obviously, it's not the original building. It had an older building before then, and then it was knocked down at probably in the 30s, I'd imagine, and they built the new one.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I've got some nice pictures of it. And then you go a little bit further up, and you've got what used to be a bookshop, used to be the old Black Dog, which was another pub in West Street.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, whereabouts is that?
So if you come out Carshalton Station down the hill, and then you turn right, and then on the left, there was a thing which used to be called the old Carshalton Internet Bookshop or something, and it's got kind of a rounded roof.
Ah, yes. Okay, okay. That's next to the Sun, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in between the Sun and the station, I suppose.
Right, okay. And that was another pub?
Yeah. And unusual because it's one of the pubs that still exists. Although it's not a pub, it's a bit like the old Swan Ale House in that the building is still there. Whereas there's a lot of other pubs that existed in this sort of area that are no longer there at all. It's
interesting. I heard something or read something many years ago, and I haven't been able to qualify this, so I don't know if this is actually truth, but there's something in it that sounds like it could be true. And what it said was that the area of land to the south of Carshalton, so kind of Carshalton Beaches and beyond, was originally held by Quakers. And one of the land covenants was that they weren't allowed to build pubs on the Quaker land. And so this is why Carshalton had such a huge concentration of pubs. And there's no other pub between sort of, going that way towards Oaks Park. If you think about it, there's nothing really.
So I've heard about that. Yeah. I haven't particularly researched it fully, but I've not found specific evidence of that. You've got to remember it's a fairly new area, all that area around what is now Carshalton Beaches Station, because that was just a siding. And it was mainly just filled, so there wouldn't really be much need for a pub in some ways, because a lot of the pubs in Carshalton are going back 200, 300 years, some of them. So how true that is, I now know that the license doesn't seem to be a problem, because you've got Vinoteca, I think it is, the Italian restaurant next to the Carshalton Beaches Station, which sells alcohol.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. Okay.
So I don't think it's any longer a problem. It's true that there's not many pubs there, but whether it's down to that, I don't know.
Maybe it's just one of those
old wives' tales kind of thing.
That's the one, the old wives' tale. It gets passed down through the centuries. It's kind of mad. Carshalton's sort of about the same size or area as the Vatican, and yet we've got sort of you could probably do a couple of rounds of pub golf. You could do at least a 9-hole pub golf. And probably go around twice if you were brave enough. I don't know if anyone's ever tried that. Well, perhaps when lockdown ends, the Carshalton pub challenge. Perhaps you could create a scorecard with a different pub. Yeah. But Rob, so one of the pieces of artwork that you did produce was the pubs of Carshalton. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
So I'm a graphic designer by trade, and I've got my own design company, and I do digital and print work. And I'd seen a similar sort of concept of this sort of pub. People have been drawing pubs and things. I thought, well, that was quite nice what they've done. I thought I can do that kind of thing. And I thought Carshalton's got in my back of my mind, I always knew Carshalton had this kind of pub route and a load of pubs, and I had heard people mention pub crawls vaguely in the past. And I thought, well, actually, this could work quite well. So I started to map it out on this little map, and then I thought, actually, these buildings work quite well. I started drawing them up. And then so I finished it, and I thought, actually, that works quite well. That's quite exciting. I think people quite like that in Carshalton because they do love their pubs, as we know. And then my friend Louise, a very good friend of mine, does the drawings for Caladoodle's gift shop in their window. She does like illustrations for them. She's done it for years and she knows them. So I spoke to her and showed her the poster and she really liked it. And she said, oh, I'll mention that to Claire, who owns Caladoodle's. And so I went into Claire and she went, oh, yeah, okay, I'll give it a go. So she put them in the window and then it's just really, really took off in the area.
Wow.
Lots of people bought them. Really pleased about that. In fact, I also do a Carshalton pub mug, which has it's the same, similar to the poster, but it has all the pubs on the mug, which is actually in Honeywood Museum. And that was, again, we stocked them up and they said, well, let's see how it goes. We worked out a price. They get some money out of it. I get some money to pay for them. And then they just sold out in the first weekend.
Oh, wow.
And then we've sold, hundreds of those mugs, which are currently only available from Honeywood, and it's shut at the moment.
Oh, right. Okay.
Again, people love the pub, so they buy that. Yeah, and I've done some coasters of them as well, funny enough, which I only sell online. And I've sold quite a few packs of coasters as well with all the little pubs, which are really nice, and they're glossy, and they're heat resistant, and they work really well. I've done some greeting cards which show all 9 pubs, and on the back, it's got the pub crawl. And the reason I've just done that is it's something which is much more economical for people, that if they just want a memento of the pubs, they can get the greeting card. Basically what it is, all the coasters are of single pubs and they're all square. So I've taken these full colour squares of the coasters and put them onto a square greeting card with 9 squares of all the 9 pubs. And then on the back, it's got a map showing you where all the pubs are with the words Carshalton Pub Crawl on it.
Rob, if we were to go on a virtual pub crawl or a fantasy pub crawl right now in Carshalton, where would we start?
If you follow the actual pub crawl route, it's designed that you can get a train to Carshalton Station if you don't live locally. Okay. And then you work your way... Oh, no, so the Railway Tavern's first, in fact.
Right, okay. So we're going to the Railway Tavern. We're going to have, what's that, Fuller's Pub. So we're going to have a pint of London Pride in the Railway.
And you might see it in the garden because Judy, who's the landlady there, has got a really nice garden with hanging baskets and comfy sofas.
That pub, that building has the feeling like it used to be some kind of hotel as well. It's kind of has that look to it. Do you think it was at some point in its history, or was it just designed to look that way?
It's interesting that it's built by the train station, although it's a relatively newish station, possibly a line. It's not a very big pub, but I suppose it wouldn't surprise me that it had places to stay above. Certainly the Sun Inn obviously has, because that's quite a large Sun Hotel. The Railway Tavern's a really friendly pub, a really local pub, and really caring about their community and about, supporting the community, which is what makes them interesting, isn't it? They all have sort of good and bad things about, well, not bad things, but, good things about all of them. So,
so we finished up our drinks at the Railway, and are we going to...
And then we go down to the Sun.
Right, so we're going to the Sun, right. Yeah, I've done a couple of gigs in the Sun before, which has been quite fun. Drinks are bit on the pricey side, I'd say.
Yeah, it's lovely, and their food is good as well. If you want to have a meal out, it's a good place to go. Where do you play when you do your music there?
So we've done it. I've played in the library bar upstairs and also in the garden. Yeah, it's been good. I think last year, and the Andy Turner Sunset Festival last year, they had about... it was so busy you could barely move in the garden. Just trying to get from one side to the other was it was so busy. And I think they raised about £8,000 or £9,000 for the Sepsis Trust.
Wow!
So that's what they aim to do each year. So
they do a lot of good work at the pub, and I know they for example deliver meals to old people, and they've had old people come in and have their meals, and just in terms of the community, they're a really important part of it.
Yeah, and I know that entertainment guy there, or I don't know if that's what his title is, but Nathan. He's Nathan Radley. He's a good guy, and he's tried to do a lot in terms of inspiring musicians and getting people involved as well. So yeah, I think the Sun, they're doing some good things.
I think the live music is an important part of the pub scene, and it gets forgotten about. I mean, there's obviously other pubs on the crawl that do live music still, and I think people underestimate how much that's a useful thing to do of an evening if you live in the area. And it's actually, I know we've got the Charles Crier now, but at points in the year there's a lot of going on where you can go and have a pint, you can go and listen to some music, and it's actually quite a good evening out. I think people forget that exists. They just think, I'll have a pint with friends, or I'll just go and have a meal. But actually the live music and our whole thing is actually quite important, and I think it's always good to develop and promote. Yeah, and so also actually in the Sun pub, I should just say, if you ever go to the toilets, they've got a picture of the Carshalton pub crawl in the men's toilet.
Oh right, okay. Okay, I'll look at that. They've also got now you come to mention it, they've also got the newspaper cutting from the day I think England won the World Cup. I think they've got the yeah, anyway, the things.
I love that.
So we've come out of the Sun, and we're walking down towards the. Are we going down? Where are we going actually after that?
Okay, so then we cut. We'll pop along to Palmerston.
Right. Okay. Have you ever been there?
I've been there because I used to live in Butter Hill.
Okay.
And I used to when I was working in town, I'd come from the station. We'd occasionally pop in there. It's got quite a nice little redeveloped garden area at the back. Actually, it's all kind of done with proper seating and heating. It's got these little sort of pods behind the pub. And then when you sit in the pod, there's a button, and you can turn a thing on that provides heat above you.
Oh, right, okay.
Go in there any time of year, and it's just, it's quite nicely done. And they do music in there occasionally. Yeah, and it's quite an interesting area. The whole Mill Lane has got quite a lot of pub history along it as well.
Oh, right, okay.
Do you know Mill Lane at all very well?
I know it reasonably well. I know where it is, but go on, that sounds interesting.
So, I mean, there's two old pubs. There was one called, which I know nothing about, and no one seems to know anything about, called the Wheat Shift. There was a pub on the corner of, is it Station Road now, I think? There was a pub there called the Wheat Shift, and this is going back 200 years.
Wow.
And then you carry on past the Palmerston, and you get to Gurney Road, and I've only just recently found that out. There's a Prince Alfred pub on the corner there as well. And I've found a very old picture from above, which shows the actual building. And I don't think I'd have posted on a local history group, and no one had even really, I don't think anyone heard of that pub either. So that was for me, that was quite exciting to find that. And that must have closed in about 1910, I think, off the top of my head. But it was, again, a very industrial area over the road from there. And so all these pubs were probably a lot of thirsty workers, basically. Yeah,
because they had all the sort of print works and leather tanneries and all sorts of stuff along the river there, didn't they? So... Yeah. So
you go to Palmerston, and then you come back down. You might cut through the park, possibly, and you get to number 4 on this pub crawl, which is the Coach and Horses.
Okay, in the High Street.
Next to Woodman. I've actually very rarely been in.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I've never drunk. If anything, it's the only pub I haven't actually drunk in on my whole pub crawl.
Oh, right, okay.
You've been in there?
I've been in there. I went in there to watch some football a couple of years ago, and there was a live band on once. But that's But
I've watched they did a live stream on Instagram once of someone playing in the pub, and it looked quite a nice atmosphere in there. So
okay, interesting. So you have you left out the Fox and Hounds, because obviously that's closed down now. But is that going to be another one of Carshalton's long lost pubs?
Currently, it is on my list of long lost pubs of Carshalton, and. A very nice pub, and I have been in there many times and drunk there many times. I don't know how much you know, but they have got plans, and I think permission's been passed for them to build knock that down basically, and build another building in a similar vein to the one that's there already, which everyone can argue all about these things as much as they like. To me, it's a shame they're losing that original building. I wish someone had the money to just repair it and do it up. But economically, these things don't always make sense. Yeah, so it's being knocked down, and I don't know if you know, it's got very big cellars underneath.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Which run under the road, and they actually flood whenever the water fills up over the Carshalton Park. Right. The cellars flood, and apparently it's quite unstable, which I don't quite get because it's got a road going over it. But
okay.
Apparently the whole thing, everything underneath and everything, it all needs completely kind of like filling in. They need to fill in the cellars, rebuild the foundations. So I think there's quite a lot of an overhaul needs to be done. So it's not currently on the pub crawl.
Well, it's interesting actually, because there's some old maps you can look at where it shows you've got that little water feature that comes out of Carshalton Park where it meets the high street, and on very old maps there was actually an open water course that went from that corner right across to Westcroft. And it was almost as if that there was like an open water course running side by side with the road, which has obviously been culverted now. Would make perfect sense why the Fox and Hounds cellars would flood, because the water's running literally right next to it. So
I mean, it did. Yeah, there's some nice pictures of it running along the high street, along sort of an old wall, I think, where maybe Ridlington's is now. I think there was a wall there going back, and there was the path, and then there was the water as well. I can't quite remember. It's in quite a few of the local history books. But yeah, I mean, it was a very, very watery area.
Right, so the Fox and Hounds, that's crossed off. We've done the Coach and Horses. I presume the Woodman's going to be next on the pub crawl, is it?
Woodman's next. They call themselves a wine bar, actually, I think, because another interesting thing about an area where you've got a lot of pubs is they've got to build some kind of distinction between themselves and the market that they cater for. And I think that's possibly most pronounced, ignoring the Hope, most pronounced at the Woodman, because it's called a wine bar and it's quite nice in there. It's sort of, I think it's sort of a certain different clientele to have, perhaps, obviously, the Coach and Horses. Everyone goes in there once in a while because it is such a nice place to go, and hopefully they'll be opening. I'm not sure where their plans are about opening in the near future. Got quite a nice garden area at the back.
Yes, yeah, they did that up a couple of years ago, I think. But the Woodman, as you say, because that wasn't originally constructed as a pub, though, was it? I think that was a butcher's shop.
It was a butcher's shop. Why it was constructed, and I don't have the dates on me. I know it's very, very old, and unfortunately, I don't know a lot about it. But I do have there's some lovely pictures of it as a butcher's, and where there was an old police box which used to stand by the tree outside, and the policeman used to stand there and watch the traffic come through. And there's a nice picture of that.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, but in terms of when it was built, and I don't know if it was purpose built as a butcher's or not.
Well, I don't know if you've ever been inside the Woodman. Obviously, no one's been in there for the last 3 months, but on the bar, there's actually a brass plaque. I don't know if you're aware of this, and it was actually presented. It was, it's dated something like 1893, around that time, and it was to commemorate Queen Victoria's one of her Jubilee celebrations, and it was presented to the Woodman, because I think they purveyed meat to the Queen's establishment at some point, and so they presented this brass plaque, and it actually sits on the bar in the Woodman, unless they've taken it away, I don't know, recently, but up until
the flat area of the bar or behind the bar.
On the flat, literally on the actual flat area of the bar. So yeah,
I never knew they had such high esteemed company for there. Yeah, I mean, there was obviously a lot more butchers' shops around historically. There was wasn't it the butcher's shop? There was a butcher's shop further up in Carshalton High Street as well, which got bombed. It was opposite where the Co-op is now.
Oh right, okay. There was another pub there though, wasn't there? I think it was called the King's Head.
King's Arms. Yeah.
Oh, King's Arms. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, that was where Co-op is. Where Co-op and Sainsbury's are. That whole block was a big old pub, which I presume rooms as well, because it was quite a large building. And the thing they've built isn't too bad. I mean, it was very 1930s looking now, but it doesn't look too bad. But the old building was particularly nice and brick. Again, that's one of the famous sort of old pubs of Carshalton that no longer even exists. Yeah. So
we've stumbled out of the Woodman and we're walking past the amazing All Saints Church, just taking in the view over the ponds, just having a little breather, and on our way to the Greyhound.
Yes, so we're at the Greyhound. A nice, interesting place. Obviously, you might want to sit. It's a swan bar, isn't it, at the front? So you might want to sit in there and overlook the water. Very old coaching inn, and in Borough High Street in London, there's something called the George Inn, which is also a coaching inn. So it's George Inn in Borough High Street. And then if you ask yourself, how far do you have to travel from London Bridge before you find an old coaching inn which is still being used as a tavern or a hotel? then the answer would be the Greyhound Hotel at Carshalton. So there used to be many coaching inns from London, and you have to travel all the way from London Bridge, and it's not until you get here you get to one of the existing coaching inns that's still operating as a coaching inn, because it was also on the old London to Brighton road, and it was apparently one of the largest and most, here, quoting from 1822, one of the most pleasant and extensive in Surrey. So it was a huge operation. It had lots of stabling, I presume, and it was a very popular haunt and a stop on that London to Brighton route. And the fact that it's still operating as an inn today makes it particularly sort of interesting. And it's also won, I think, the Young's Pub of the Year quite recently as well.
Oh, really? Okay.
The problem is, if I haven't got the facts in front of me, I don't want to. I can't be giving out the wrong information, but I know it's one, and rightly so, because it is actually very well organised. And we had a really good pub quiz there shortly before lockdown, which was organised by the Honeywood Museum. And I got a little team of, there's about 6 of us, and we had a nice little pub quiz in the back bar. There was quite a lot of people there, and we came out. We didn't do too badly, let's say. We didn't win, obviously, but we didn't come last.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a nice pub, really nice pub.
Cool. So we've stumbled out of the Greyhound. We're walking up Pound Street, is it? I think that's what it's called.
Yeah,
where are we off to next?
And then we're sort of going up to the Windsor Castle.
All right. I'm not sure if I've ever been in there.
Well, that's historically, possibly, again, don't quote me, but very sort of well known for music over the years.
Yes. Okay, that's true. I have heard of many music events going on there.
Yeah, like particularly sort of rock and rolly and sort of, that kind of stuff. Very sort of raw kind of music, I think. It's a nice pub, again, quite old-fashioned in there, although not that old, because it did burn down at one point. Not entirely. They have a fire in the, I can't remember the year, 60s or 70s. I think it must be 70s, late 70s. But still, and they did it up at that point, and it hasn't changed since. But it's got like open fire, little nice little garden at the back. Yeah, and it's been there for a long time on a very busy junction. But yeah, so you'd have a couple of pints in there.
We're really ramping it up now. So just to recap, how many have we been to already? So we've done the Railway, the Sun, the Palmerston, the Coach and Horses, the Woodman, the Greyhound, the Windsor. So that's 7.
Yeah.
We're up to 7. Okay. And then what, are we back into West Street?
Yes. So we're into West Street. We've gone past the Swan Inn, which would have been on your left, which is the old Swan Yard. Gone a little bit further, you would have passed on your right the old Swan Ale House. You might have had one in there as well.
Well, I mean the fancy pub crawl. If we had the time machine, we could have done it all, couldn't we? So.
yes, that's true. And then you've got on your left is the racehorse, which is quite interesting because it's got the bar on the left and the bar on the right, and then the main bar. Exactly, I'm not using the right terminology here, but the pub is in the middle, and you've got bar each side.
And then finally, the Hope, is it? Or is there no? Are we missing?
No, we haven't quite. Yes, then finally number 9.
Right.
You stagger the Hope, thinking I'll have a nice real ale.
Yeah. And probably quite strong. They were doing a beer. I can't remember what it was called, and it was one of those Belgian Abbey ales. The sort of the 10% ones, and they wouldn't even sell as a pint. They said, no, we're going to sell this as a half pint. So very responsible of them. But their story is quite interesting, isn't it? Do you know much about how that all came about? I went in there before when it was still owned by Charringtons. I assume it was Charringtons. I mean, that's still written. Is that still written on the front? Maybe not anymore. And I remember it was just a bare patch of grass at the back, and there was not much else to it. It was quite small. But then I know they've done a cooperative. Again, I don't know the dates, and I know there's a hell of a lot of people involved in it, and they've actually sort of transformed it, haven't they? Really, they've got that garden at the back. They do some very nice. They do well in the summers of years gone by. They've done some beer festivals in the tent with some live music, which have been quite fun events. And they've got the little there's a piano out the back. They've also got, actually interesting, they've got some old English pub games like billiards. They've got a billiards table, and I was in there with a friend once a couple of years ago, and the barman came over and showed us like how to play this game. And so we're trying to it's kind of like little sticks, and you kind of get the cue, and you have to Yeah, I don't really remember.
Do you have to knock them over on bits of I don't think on string, or do you have to knock things over on it?
Something like that. Yeah, it's but it's
It looks like the kind of game that you could probably play actually if you weren't completely with it. Yeah, they have got some interesting things in there, and actually virtually every time I've been in there, they've had someone playing some sort of folk music in the corner. And there's always a lot of, I mean, it's a stereotype, but there's a lot of people with beards in there as well. It's true. But it is it does do great beer, and does, as you said, a great variety of stronger beers and in fact everything really. And it's so tiny, so it's great that they've opened it up a little bit to make a bit more. But in terms of the cooperative, I don't know a huge amount of detail, but I do know they've saved it. And it won the CAMRA Greater London Pub of the Year.
Yeah. Was it last year? Okay.
So it's a great accolade and well deserved. And it, so it wins its place on the Carshalton pub crawl very proudly, I think. Yeah, I think the Hope is really the most pub of them all.
Yeah.
It's about this, as you say, it's a cooperative. It's people love the beer and they understand the beer, and you also get lots of people just coming to the area to go to that pub. So it makes it a kind of interesting mix of people.
Brilliant. And I suppose would that would be where we'd end it? We'd sort of stagger back to the station if you've come from further afield, or
you probably get on a train and sleep off, and then find yourself at a terminal in the morning and realise you haven't woken up. But yeah, it's and I'm sure people. It's quite a hard pub crawl. I mean, I think like for me now, I wouldn't. We did try and start trying to do a few. I think it'd struggle to do the whole lot now. I mean, if it was open,
you
need to have a strong disposition, I think.
Rob, this has been it's been really cool chatting to you, and I've really enjoyed our kind of fantasy pub crawl, and hopefully we'll rub shoulders in Carshalton at some point. Wish you all the best going forward.
Keep in touch. Thanks a lot. Bye.